Unveiled Secrets. How my father's hidden legacy outshone my mother's betrayal. When Dad died, Mom said it was time I left the house because she inherited all Dad's properties, and I wasn't family. Dad left me with only his old carpentry workshop. When I opened the shop after some months, what I discovered changed everything. Clara kicked me out with nothing, but Dad's hidden gold built me a throne. She's still scraping for crumbs. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. If you enjoy story like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world, and together, we'll keep sharing stories that remind us we're never truly alone. Now let's dive into the story. I stood there in the living room, the same one where Dad taught me to sand a plank smooth when I was 8, and watched Mom rip my world apart. It was the day of his funeral, and the air felt heavy, not with grief, but something colder. She didn't cry, not once. Her lips were a thin line, her grey eyes sharp as she adjusted the black shawl over her shoulders. The house was quiet too, like it knew what was coming. I'd just turned 28, still raw from losing him, and she chose that moment to drop the hammer. "Jake," she said, voice flat, "your father left me everything. The house, the savings, land. All of it's mine now." She paused, letting it sink in. "You get the workshop. That's it." I blinked at her. The workshop. That's all he wanted me to have. She didn't flinch. "It's more than enough. Pack your things. I want you out by next week." I opened my mouth to argue, but she turned away, fussing with a stack of condolence cards on the coffee table. My chest tightened. "Mama Clara, why? I'm your son. We're family." She froze, her back to me, then slowly faced me again. Her stare cut deeper than any words could. "You're not family," she said, each syllable deliberate. "Not really." It hit me like a punch. Not family. I'd grown up in this house, spent years at Dad's side in that workshop, learning to measure twice and cut once. I'd carried his coffin that morning, my hands still sore from the weight, and she stood there telling me I didn't belong. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat locked up. All I managed was a nod before stumbling out the door. The workshop was a 10-minute walk, tucked behind a row of sagging oaks at the edge of town. I hadn't been there since Dad got sick, and it showed. The windows were grimy, the door creaked like it was begging to stay shut, and the sign, A. Hammond's Carpentry, hung crooked above the entrance. Dad's name, not mine. I pushed inside. The familiar hum of his tools was replaced by silence. My duffel bag hit the floor with a thud. This was it, my inheritance. A dusty shed full of memories and rust. I didn't sleep that first night. I sat on an old stool, staring at the workbench where Dad used to whistle while he planed wood. He'd been a big man, broad shoulders, calloused hands, always grinning when he caught me sneaking sawdust into my pockets. "You're a maker, Jake," he'd say. "Trust your hands." Now he was gone, and Mom, Clara, had turned me into a stranger. I pulled an old photo from my wallet, one I'd kept since I was 12. Me and Dad, side by side, sanding a cedar chest. My hair was a mess, his apron stained with varnish. We looked happy. I traced his face with my thumb, wondering why he'd let her do this. The next week blurred by. I packed my clothes, books, the little I owned, and hauled it all to the workshop. Clara didn't say goodbye when I left the house. She just watched from the porch, arms crossed, like she was guarding her prize. I didn't look back. The workshop became my bunker, half home, half prison. I slept on a cot in the corner, ate cheap sandwiches from the gas station, and ignored the neighbors' pitying glances when they passed by. I wasn't ready to touch Dad's tools yet. They felt too much like him, and I wasn't sure I could handle that. Days turned into weeks, and I kept my head down. Took a job unloading trucks at the hardware store, just enough to pay for food and keep the lights on. The workshop stayed dark, a tomb for the life I used to have. I'd walk past the house sometimes, late at night, seeing Clara's silhouette in the window. She'd inherited everything, but she didn't look happy. Maybe never would. I didn't care, or told myself I didn't. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I was flipping through Dad's old sketchbook, full of furniture designs he'd never built, when my foot hit a loose floorboard. It wobbled under my weight, a sound I hadn't noticed before. I knelt, pressed down, and felt it give. My pulse quickened. Dad always said, a good carpenter hides his best work. Was this something he'd left behind? I grabbed a pry bar from the workbench, hands trembling, and wedged it under the board. It popped up with a groan, revealing a dark hollow underneath. I couldn't see much, but I knew one thing. Whatever was down there, it was more than Clara had ever given me. I sat back, staring at that hole in the floor. Part of me wanted to dig in right then, to rip it all open and find out what Dad had hidden. But another part, the part still reeling from Clara's words, held me back. What if it was nothing? What if this was just another disappointment? I didn't know it yet, but that floorboard was about to change everything. For now, though, I just sat there, the photo of me and Dad clutched in my hand, wondering if he'd known all along that I'd need something to hold on to. It was late. The workshop dimmed under a single bulb, and my pry bar sat heavy in my hand. I'd been living in this place for months, scraping by, avoiding Dad's tools like they might burn me. But that loose floorboard, it felt like a whisper from him, a nudge I couldn't ignore. My heart thudded as I wedged the bar deeper and yanked. The wood splintered free, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside was a metal box, rusted at the edges, about the size of a bread loaf. I hesitated, fingers hovering over it. What if it was empty? What if it wasn't? I lifted it out, the weight surprising me, and set it on the workbench. The lid groaned as I forced it open. My breath caught. Gold and silver ingots gleamed back at me, 6 of them, small but solid, stacked neat as bricks. Tucked beside them was a folded scrap of paper. I unfolded it with shaky hands, recognizing Dad's blocky handwriting. For my son. True legacy. Trust your hands. That was it. No explanation, no apology for Clara's betrayal, just those words, like he'd known. I'd need them. I sat there, stunned, running my thumb over the metal. This wasn't pocket change, it was a lifeline. Months of unloading trucks for pennies, eating stale bread, sleeping on a cot that creaked with every move. And here was Dad, reaching out from the grave to pull me up. I didn't cry, but my eyes burned. Clara had the house, the land, everything she'd clawed for, and he'd still found a way to give me something she couldn't touch. The next morning, I took 1 ingot to a guy the first knew, Pete, who ran a pawn shop 2 towns over. He squinted at it through a loop, muttering about purity and weight, then slid a stack of cash across the counter. 3 grand, he said. No questions asked. I didn't haggle. That money was a hammer in my pocket, ready to rebuild what Clara had smashed. I paid off the electric bill, bought a new lock for the workshop door, and started cleaning the place up. Dust flew as I swept, and for the first time in months, I touched Dad's tools, his plane, his chisels, his saw. They felt alive again. I didn't tell anyone about the find. Not Pete, not the guys at the hardware store, nobody. Clara's voice still echoed in my head, "You're not family." And I wasn't about to give her a reason to come sniffing around. Instead, I got to work. I sanded down the workbench, fixed the leaky roof, and hung a sign out front, Jake Hammond Custom Furniture. Dad's name was still on the old sign, but this one was mine. I sketched designs at night. Simple stuff. Tables, chairs, shelves, things I could sell quick. My hands moved like they remembered what my head had forgotten. Word spread fast. A lady from church ordered a rocking chair, then a guy down the street wanted a coffee table. I worked late, sawdust piling up, the hum of the bandsaw drowning out the silence that used to choke me. Cash trickled in, not a flood, but enough to ditch the truck gig and buy real food. I'd catch myself grinning sometimes, picturing Dad nodding from somewhere beyond. Trust your hands, he'd written, and I did. They were steady now, shaping wood into something solid one could stand on. But it wasn't all smooth cuts. I'd walk into town for supplies and hear whispers, Clara's name floating around like a bad rumor. She was still in the house, people said, but she'd been flashing money lately. New clothes, a shiny car in the driveway. I didn't get it. Dad hadn't left her broke, but he hadn't left her rich either. Where was it coming from? I pushed it out of my mind. She wasn't my problem anymore. The workshop was my world now, and it was growing. One night, I sat counting orders, 5 in a week, more than I'd expected. The box with the remaining ingots sat locked in a drawer, a secret I hadn't touched again. I didn't need to yet. The business was picking up, and I liked earning it the hard way, piece by piece. I flipped through Dad's old sketchbook for inspiration, tracing his lines with my finger. That's when I noticed the toolbox in the corner. His big one, padlocked shut. I'd never bothered with it, figured it was just spare bits and blades, but something about it tugged at me now, like the floorboard had. I grabbed a screwdriver, tempted to pry it open, then stopped. Not yet. The ingots were enough for one day. I leaned back, the cot creaking under me, and stared at the ceiling. The workshop wasn't just a shed anymore, it was a pulse, a heartbeat I'd brought back to life. Clara could keep her house, her land, her victory. I had this, and I had Dad's words burned into me like a brand. Trust your hands. They'd carried me this far, and I had a feeling they weren't done yet. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was how soon Clara's shadow would creep back in, threatening to undo it all. Business was good, better than I dared hope. The workshop buzzed with orders, my hands moving fast over oak and cherry, turning raw boards into pieces people fought over. I'd built a name for myself in town, not just as Hammond's kid, but Jake, the guy who could craft a table sturdy enough for a lifetime. Cash piled up, slow but steady, and I didn't touch the ingots locked away in that drawer. I wanted to earn this, prove Clara wrong with every nail I drove. She'd cast me out, called me nothing, but here I was, standing taller than ever. Until she showed up. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, the sun slanting through the workshop windows. I was sanding a bookshelf when the door creaked open. I didn't look up at first. Customers wandered in all the time now, but the silence felt off, heavy. I glanced over, and there she was. Clara. Not the Clara I'd last seen on the porch, arms crossed and smug. This Clara was a wreck. Her coat hung loose, stained at the cuffs, her hair a tangled mess. Her eyes, once sharp enough to cut, were dull, darting around like she didn't know where to land them. "Jake," she said, voice thin. "I need to talk to you." I set the sandpaper down, wiping my hands on my jeans. "What do you want?" She stepped closer, clutching a frayed purse. "I'm in trouble. The house, it's gone. They took it." I frowned. "Who took it?" "The bank." She swallowed hard, looking away. "I borrowed against it. Things went bad. I've got nowhere to go." I stared at her, piecing it together. The whispers I'd heard in town. The new car, fancy clothes. It wasn't Dad's money she'd been burning through. She'd gambled it all, leveraged the house for loans she couldn't pay, and now she was here, standing in my workshop, asking for what? A handout? After everything? My jaw tightened. "You've got nowhere to go," I repeated, slow, letting it hang there. "And you think I owe you something?" Her head snapped up, a flicker of the old Clara in her glare. "I'm your mother." "No," I said, stepping toward her. "You made it real clear I'm not family. Remember that. You got the house, the land, everything Dad built, and you threw me out. Like trash. Now it's gone, and you come crawling to me." She flinched but didn't back down. "I didn't know it'd end like this. I thought I could handle it. Please, Jake, I've got nothing." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You've got nothing? Welcome to my world, Clara. I slept on a cot in this dump for months because of you. Go find your real family." "Oh wait, you don't have one either, do you?" Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she'd cry, but she didn't. Just turned and shuffled out, the door banging shut behind her. I stood there, fists clenched, my pulse hammering. It felt good, damn good, to throw her words back in her face. She'd wanted me gone, and now she was the one with nothing. I went back to sanding, harder than I needed to, the wood groaning under my hands. But that high didn't last. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake her. I'd be mid-cut on a plank, and her voice would creep in. I've got nowhere to go. I told myself she deserved it. She dug her own hole. Yet every time I walked past the diner or the gas station, I'd hear bits and pieces. Clara spotted sleeping in her car. Clara begging for change outside the market. Clara looking like she hadn't eaten in days. People didn't say it to my face. They knew better, but the whispers found me anyway. I tried to focus on the work. Orders kept coming. A dining set for a lawyer, a crib for a new mom. The workshop was my fortress, proof I didn't need her. I'd even started sketching bigger projects, cabinets, a bed frame, things Dad would have been proud of. But at night, when the tools went quiet, I'd sit on that cot and wonder. How had she lost it all so fast? What kind of mess had she gotten into? And why did I care? One evening, I was locking up when Mike, a guy the first knew from the hardware store, pulled up in his truck. "Saw your mom today," he said, casual like it was nothing. "She's crashing at the old mill lot. Looks rough, man." I shrugged. "Not my problem." He nodded, but his eyes lingered. "Just thought you'd want to know." I didn't answer. He drove off, and I stood there, keys digging into my palm. Rough. That word stuck. I pictured her, proud, cold Clara, huddled in a parking lot, and something twisted in my gut. Not pity yet, but something close. I went back inside, pulled Dad's sketchbook out, and flipped through it, trying to drown her out. That's when I glanced at the locked toolbox again. It had been sitting there since the ingots, taunting me. I grabbed a hammer, ready to smash it. Open, then stopped. Whatever was in there, it could wait. Clara wouldn't stop. Rattling around in my head, though, and I hated her for it. She'd fallen, sure, but she'd dragged me down with her once already. I wasn't about to let her do it again, or so I thought. Clara wouldn't leave me alone, not in person, but in my head. I'd be planing a board or sketching a new design, and there she'd be, her hollow eyes, cracked voice, begging in that workshop doorway. I'd thrown her out, turned her own words against her, and it should have felt final, but it didn't. Something gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. The orders kept rolling in. Tables, chairs, a big wardrobe for some rich guy up the hill, and I buried myself in them. Work was my shield, the hum of the saw my armor. Still, she lingered. It was a Friday night, maybe a week after she'd shown up, when I hit my limit. I'd finished a chair, set it by the window to dry, and sat down with a beer. The workshop was quiet, just the faint buzz of the bulb overhead. I kept glancing at Dad's locked toolbox in the corner. It had been there since the ingots, a mystery I dodged. Clara's fall, Mike's words about her at the mill lot. It all swirled together, pushing me toward it. I grabbed a screwdriver, my hands steady from months of carving, and popped the lock. The lid sprang open with a clang. Inside wasn't tools or scraps like I'd figured. It was papers, folded letters, a few photos, and a yellowed envelope with my name on it. I pulled the envelope first, my gut twisting as I tore it open. Adoption papers. My papers. I scanned the lines. Jake Carter, born to Mary and Daniel Carter, orphaned at 6 months after a car wreck, taken in by Thomas and Clara Hammond. Dad's signature was there, bold and sure, but Clara's was shaky, like she'd hesitated. I dropped the papers, my breath short. Adopted. I wasn't their blood. The photos came next. Me as a baby, chubby and grinning, held by Dad in the workshop. Another of my birth parents, a young couple with tired smiles, a weird pendant hanging around the woman's neck. Then letters, a stack of them, all in Dad's hand. I read the first one, dated a year after they took me in. Clara is struggling. She didn't want this, but I couldn't leave him. He's mine now. Another, years later, she's cold to him. I see it. I'll make it right. The last one hit hardest, scribbled when I was 10. She'll never love him like I do. I'll give him what she won't. I shoved the letters back in the box, my head spinning. Dad had chosen me. Clara hadn't. All those years, her sharp looks, clipped words, they weren't just her nature. She resented me from the start, a kid forced on her by a man she couldn't say no. And Dad? He'd known. hidden the ingots, locked this truth away, betting I'd find it when I needed it most. I wasn't a Hammond by blood, but I was his son. Clara's not family line wasn't a lie, it was her truth, not his. I paced the workshop, the chair mocking me from the corner. Who was I now? Jake Hammond, the carpenter. Jake Carter, the orphan. I'd built this life thinking I belonged, but it was a house of cards, and Clara had kicked it down long before she lost the real one. I grabbed the pendant photo again, squinting at it. The design, swirls around a stone, looked familiar, like something I'd seen on one of the ingots. Was there more to this? I didn't know, and right then, I didn't care. The adoption papers burned hotter in my mind. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat on the cot, replaying everything. Clara's rejection, Dad's quiet love, the way she'd stood in my workshop begging. I hated her more now, knowing she'd never wanted me, but I hated myself too for still feeling that twist in my chest when I thought of her out there alone. She'd lost the house because she'd gambled it away, sure, but had she lost me because she'd never claimed me? I didn't owe her anything, not a damn thing. Yet her shadow kept growing. By morning, I was a mess, but the work didn't wait. I threw myself into the wardrobe job, hammering harder than I needed to. The noise drowned out the questions, but not the guilt. Mike's voice echoed, "Looks rough, man." And I wondered how bad she'd gotten. I could have walked away clean, let her rot in the bed she'd made, but Dad's words from the letters stuck. "I'll make it right." He'd meant me, not her, but I couldn't shake the feeling he'd want me to be better than her, bigger than her. I finished the wardrobe late, delivered it, and pocketed the cash. On my way back, I passed the mill lot. Didn't stop, just slowed enough to glance. No sign of her. Maybe she'd moved on. Maybe she hadn't. I got to the workshop, locked the door, and stared at the toolbox again. The truth was out now, sharp and jagged. It cut both ways. Clara had fallen, but I was the one teetering, trying to figure out who I'd be when the dust settled. The workshop was my kingdom now, but it didn't feel like a victory. Orders stacked up, dresses, desks, a porch swing for some old couple down the road, and I worked like a machine, hands steady, mind a mess. The adoption papers sat in that toolbox, a truth I couldn't unsee. Dad had picked me, loved me, built me up while Clara tore me down. She was out there somewhere, broken by her own choices, and I told myself I was done. But I wasn't, not really. It started with a call from Mrs. Tate, the church lady who'd bought that rocking chair months back. I was mid-cut on a plank when the phone buzzed. "Jake," she said, voice low, "your mom's in a bad way. Saw her at the shelter off Route 9. She's sick, real sick." I muttered a thanks and hung up, my saw stalling in hand. Sick. The word hit different now, after everything. I pictured her, Clara, the woman who'd called me nothing, curled up in some grimy cot, coughing her pride away. I didn't owe her, kept telling myself that as I finished the cut, wood-splitting clean. But Mrs. Tate's words stuck. I worked late, trying to outrun them, hammering nails into a shelf until my arms ached. The workshop was alive, tools singing, sawdust piling, but I wasn't, not fully. Dad's letters kept flashing in my head. "I'll make it right." He'd meant the ingots, the shop, me, not her. Yet here I was, restless, imagining Clara fading out there while I sanded my way to success. I locked up, grabbed my keys, and drove to Route 9 before I could talk myself out of it. The shelter was a squat brick building, lights flickering over a line of hunched figures waiting for soup. I spotted her near the back, bundled in a coat too big for her shrinking frame. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken, a cough rattling out as she shuffled forward. She didn't see me at first. I stood by my truck, hands in pockets, watching. This wasn't the Clara who'd kicked me out. That woman was gone, replaced by this shell. I almost left right then. Almost. But her head turned, and our eyes locked. She froze, soup bowl trembling in her hands. I walked over slow, my boots loud on the gravel. "Jake," she rasped, voice barely there. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away, just looked at her, really looked. The resentment was still there, hot in my chest, but it wasn't alone anymore. Something else stirred, something Dad had planted. "You're sick," I said finally. "How bad?" She shrugged, a weak twitch. "Bad enough. Don't need your pity. I'm not here for that." My tone was flat, but my mind raced. She'd lost the house, everything, and now she was losing herself. I could walk away, let her fade into the crowd. She'd earned it. But standing there, I saw Dad's face instead, his grin, his rough hands guiding mine over a lathe. He trusted me to be more than her. "I've got nothing left," she said, unprompted, staring at the ground. "You were right. No family." I clenched. My jaw. "You made sure of that." She didn't argue, just coughed again, harder this time, and I saw the fight drain out of her. I could have said more, cut deeper, but I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked back to the truck. She didn't call after me. I drove off, her shadow shrinking in the rearview, and told myself that was it. Closure. Done. It wasn't. 2 days later, I called a guy the first knew, a landlord with a cheap unit on the edge of town. "Need a place for someone," I said. "No questions. I'll cover the first year." He didn't ask who, just took the cash I wired over. I gave him Clara's name through a third party, some church volunteer, so she'd never trace it back. They got her out of the shelter, set her up with a bed and a roof. I didn't visit, didn't check, didn't want her gratitude, if she even had any left. Back at the workshop, I pulled out a slab of walnut I'd been saving. I sketched a chair, not for a customer, but for me. Simple, sturdy, with clean lines. I worked slow, letting my hands find the rhythm Dad had taught me. The adoption, Clara's fall, the ingots, it all churned as I carved, but the wood stayed true. Hours turned to days, and when I finished, I set it by the workbench and sat in it. It held me, solid as stone. I looked around, the tools gleaming, the orders stacked, the sign out front with my name on it. This was mine, not Clara's, not some ghost of who I wasn't. Dad's legacy wasn't the gold or the shop. It was me, the man I'd built myself into. I'd given Clara a lifeline, not because she deserved it, but because I could. Because I was more significant than her hate. I leaned back in that chair, the weight lifting off my chest, and knew I'd finally found my place. Not as a Hammond, not as a Carter, but as Jake. And that was enough.